So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another replay on the recently released 0.95 patch, and I have actually developed a bit of a backlog, which is quite nice because it means that I won't be running out of content to produce like I was actually running into before the patch released, so that's good. And this is going to be a pitch battle because it's on the Dead Marshes, and I do like the Dead Marshes as a map because it takes the concept of a pitch battle and warps it a little bit. There are terrain features such as these hills back here, and over here you get some sort of raised plateaus, but obviously the primary thing about the Dead Marshes is the fact that you have the marshes, the bodies of water which form choke points, and introducing choke points to a field battle is an interesting one because it will reduce the overall effectiveness of cavalry for one thing. You can still use it to good effect, but you do need to be more careful with it because obviously people are going to be able to funnel it into a choke point a lot more effectively. Archers are going to be a big factor because obviously it's going to be more difficult to reach them a lot of the time, and infantry as well can be useful, but you need to pick the right infantry, of course, because in a choke point situation like this, fragile infantry is going to fall away in the face of more hardy infantry all the time. So let's go through the army compositions and see how this battle goes, and we'll start off with the one who sent me the replay, and this is Second Pink, who is playing as the Realm of Lothlorien, so the Lothlorien elves. Looks like he's got a couple of units of these Lothlorien archers, the heavier elven archers, so they've got a better armor value than the standard ones, and they're also going to be better in melee. Very good all-round unit. In a situation like this, I would imagine you'll see the Lothlorien archers quite a lot. And back here he's got both of the high-tier Lothlorien archers. He's got the Galathrym nobles and the Sindar archers. The Galathrym nobles, I believe, are the slightly more effective variant, but both of them are going to be very, very powerful. Of course, I believe they're both multiple HP, so they can double as very effective infantry units. There aren't very many men in either unit though, so again, you do run the risk of being slightly outnumbered. The Galathrym nobles actually have significantly more men than the Sindar archers though, interestingly enough. Over here we've got, I think, a single unit of the Lothlorien Mounted Company. Well, that might be two actually, based on how many are there. We'll see when the battle gets underway. It might be two actually, based on the banner carriers there. And very effective Lothlorien Lancer unit. They are surprisingly good in melee because the melee skill they have allows them to stand up to units which other Lancers would not. But they do cost 1,000 each, so that is a big investment, and on a map like this it might not pan out for him, but we shall see. Over here we have a unit of the Sindar Blade Masters. These are the regular variant without the armor upgrade. They can hide everywhere, of course. They aren't quite as good as the standard heavy Lothlorien swordsmen, but they will still do a very good job in melee, especially if they're backed up, and obviously their utility as an ambush unit is also going to be quite important. As we move on back here, we can see that he's also brought some Lothlorien axes. Not quite as survivable as the Lothlorien swords, but they do quite a lot of damage, and they are a little bit cheaper as well. They aren't AP in melee anymore, as I'm sure many people have noticed with the one-handed axemen, but with the elven axes, of course, they do still have the skill to fall back on, so that's very nice. A couple of units of the Lothlorien spears, the heavy Lothlorien spearmen, and again, it's going to be a similar situation here as it is going to be with most of the heavier elven spears. Pretty good at warding off cavalry, and they're also going to be very tough to break down from the front. But they can potentially take quite a lot of damage, particularly if they're overwhelmed from the sides. And then over here, some Lothlorien blades as well. So these are the swordsmen, and they have, I believe they are more survivable. I think they are all round a slightly better unit than the Lothlorien axes, but they are also more expensive. So a sword and board unit there for Lothlorien. And then finally, we have possibly the most powerful single unit in the Lothlorien roster, with the possible exception of their pikemen. We have the Galathrym Riders. As a horse archer unit, they are probably the strongest in the game at the moment, simply because their ability in melee is so high as well. They are a multiple HP elven horse archer, so obviously they've got the accuracy, they've got the high missile damage, and they've got the multiple HP, which helps them a great deal in melee. But they are horse archers, so I think their charge is still going to be just one, which means they can't be used in the same way as shock cavalry. Moving on to his nearest ally, we have the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, with their Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm played by Horsey Hawks YT, and he has got obviously the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm here at the front, the archers. Decent missile damage, but they are more fragile than basically every other Khazad-dûm unit, so they can be engaged in a skirmish fight and defeated fairly comfortably by several other units. But they are still a pretty good ranged unit for Khazad-dûm. Interestingly enough, he's brought the Mercenary Guildsmen, which I kind of took a dump on these guys in the Khazad-dûm faction overview by saying that they weren't exactly the kind of unit that Khazad-dûm would bring an awful lot, but we'll see how effective they are here. I would have thought that some of the more standard Khazad-dûm troops would probably be more useful than them. Moving back here, it looks like he's spread his forces out quite a lot to help both of his allies, which is interesting. He's got some 3rd Legion and some Sentries of Khazad-dûm, the standard 3rd Legion without the armour upgrade. potent combination of heavy infantry and pikes is going to serve Khazad-dûm well in pretty much any situation they're in, be it siege or field battle. Back here he's got the shock unit, the mercenary war chiefs, swordsmen, so they're not AP, but they're kind of the best of both worlds. They will stand up for themselves reasonably well in melee, but they do have lower morale than several of the other dwarven units. And then over here at the front he does have some 4th Legion Shield Guard, another unit you're probably going to be seeing a great deal of with regards to Khazad-dûm, because they are just going to be very, very potent at zoning out cavalry and standing up to infantry in melee, because of course the dwarven heavy armour means they're going to stick around for a little bit longer than most. Back here we also have some Khazad-dûm cavalry. We have the mercenary cavalry, so a melee cav. Going to be pretty useful to help try and zone out enemy cav from going around the far side of the map on either side. And then over here he has the mercenary crossbows as well. The mercenary crossbows do not have a lot of range, but they do carry quite a lot of punch that they can deliver to enemy cav units in melee. They are primarily cav hunters, but they are a very micro-intensive unit indeed, so if you waste them then it's going to be money down the drain. Khazad-dûm catapult, of course, I'll be interested to see how well that does in a choke pointy situation like this. And then back here we have some 2nd Legion Axe Guard. We have the Mithril Guard, which is going to be where his general's hanging out, so that is an AP unit with multiple HP, very potent indeed. And some Khazad-dûm Reclaimers. I think this is just a singular unit of Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, but they are still a very, very powerful axe unit. And then down there we've got some Hammers of Gundabad in the back behind his pikes and infantrymen. So it's going to be an interesting front line over here, the mercenary war chiefs as well. Interesting army. I think it has some potential to be quite good in this situation, but I'm not sure about the mercenary guildsmen or even the cavalry, to be honest. In this map I would be much more tempted to really wall up as the dwarves, but we'll see how it plays out. And finally we have Arcturos playing as Harad, although I guess the Southrons is not exactly inaccurate. The Southron Warband are one of my favourite units in the game, ironically enough, because they are both a meat shield and an AP spear for Harad, and that works out very, very nicely for them. Very good unit, I think, in terms of how cost effective they can be. You're going to be seeing them as playing against Harad quite a lot. So Southron Warband, several units of them, 203 men in the unit is nothing to sniff at either. He's also got some Southron Archers, which are probably the archer that Harad can bring in bulk, which is most effective. They are decent, but that mainly comes from how many of them there are in a unit. In terms of a skirmish fight for Harad, it's definitely going to be a question of volume winning out rather than quality, because it's really only the Hashari that are a genuinely scary archer unit for Harad, including the mounted variant, of course. We have a ballista as well, so another siege equipment, useful for sniping out enemy siege, which is not a bad plan on this map. It's got some serpent guards, so some nice lancers, potentially going to be able to get some nice charges off. He's of course brought the trollmen, which is still going to be a mainstay of Harad because of how potent they are in melee. Back here he's got some Southron pikes, who I believe are still an armour-piercing pike unit. I might be wrong about that, but I think that is a distinction they still have. But I do think they suffer for that in other ways, like I think their stats are pretty damn low. But even so, there are a lot of them. Another very nice unit for Harad that I like to use. Over here we've got some Muhad Beast Hunters, so some basic javelins. Also some far from basic javelins in the Demons of the Desert. Their payload is able to disrupt formations horrendously, which is going to be potentially very powerful, but obviously they are also very prone to being focused down. More Southron Warband and Pikemen, the bread and butter of the Haradrim line. And over here we've also got some Muhad Warriors, which are a sword and board unit, a new one. They're not quite as good as the dismounted Serpent Guard, but they do fulfill a nice niche in the Harad line of being this sort of more numerous sword and board unit that isn't terrible. And then over here we also have some more Trollmen, and then on the far side we also have the final wing of his cavalry. He's got some more Serpent Guard, and I assume what is his general's bodyguard, the Black Serpents, which are a multiple HP Lancer cavalry, very quick, potentially very deadly, but of course they're not going to be quite as durable as the Knights in a prolonged fight with other cavalry. Now their opponents have sort of deployed back a little bit further. We've got Seawolf playing as Rohan, who I assume is going to be in the middle here. Rohan on this map do have a conundrum on their hands because they can't go quite as cavalry heavy as normal, I don't think. We've got some Westmark Spears, formerly known as the Dismounted Royal Guard, the better spearmen in the Rohan lines, and they're going to be backed up by the Riddermark Spears, who I quite like because they are quite cost effective, provided they're backed up by other types of units. And I'm not sure whether Rohan just forgot to move these units or whether he is just sort of sending them forward as the gambit to make the enemies move in. We'll see. As we move backwards into the Rohirrim's primary line, we have some Westmark Marshals. I was very impressed with these in the Karasant video that I did, because of course they were able to get a lot of kills on units which I wasn't expecting them to do hugely well against. So we'll see if they can pull that off again here against the dwarves. They will potentially be very nicely matched up against them. 2 units of them here. We've also got some Westmark infantry, which I don't think we've actually seen a great deal of yet, despite the fact that it is something new for Rohan. They do now have a mainline infantry unit that is sword board. It'll be interesting to see how they perform here. I don't think they'll do too well against the Dwarven infantry, but against the Haradrim, they might do quite well for themselves. Over here we do have some Rohan cavalry, the Aerid of Aldberg, which is going to be the equivalent to the Serpent Guard, I would say, in this match. And over here we've got some slightly lower tier Riddermark cavalry, but again, similar story here. We've got Lancers, got quite a lot of cavalry hanging around here at the back, actually, in a more open part of the map. Riddermark cavalry. Clearly the red team here wants to bait the enemy in. We've got some First Marshal's bodyguard, which is the General's unit. In a similar vein to the Black Serpent bodyguard, this is not a knight unit, I don't believe it is, just a multiple HP Lancer, which will be interesting to see, because obviously in a prolonged fight they won't do too fantastically. That is where the General's hanging out as well. We've got some Hornburg sentries, the AP heavy infantry unit, some Westmark infantry, and then back here we also have the Sons of Eorl, or Eorl. Well, it's Eorl, isn't it? But this is where I would have put the General, to be honest with you, because they are much more hardy, and as they are knights, they can be used a little bit more defensively, whereas the Lancers, to get the most out of them, you really need to be being a little bit more aggressive with them and putting your General in harm's way. So, unless that's what you intend to do with the Sons of Eorl, so that is an entirely valid thing to do. Let's have a look over here. We do have the Realm of Linden, played by Dictar to the power of N. That's an interesting username. Linden are very potent in the right hands. They do have a lot of very nasty stuff indeed in their roster. Looks like we've got 3 units of Harlinden infantry forming up the defensive line over here. Lightly armoured, but they are essentially the equivalent to the Eldar Makar. I think the Lothlorien blades are better than them, however. Not that it matters, because the elves are matched up on opposite sides of the map, looking at this. As we move backwards, as we creep slowly towards the Linden line, we will have a look at what they have in terms of archers. Looks like they've got 3 units of 4 Linden archers, the basic archer that Linden have available. Not a bad unit by any means, obviously any elven archer is going to be pretty damn good. We've also got some 4 Linden pikes back here. Very effective, very cost effective. Over here we have what is his General's bodyguard with the bearded elf over there in the background, the Noldorin Horse Lords, or Noldorin Horse Lords. Very, very powerful. I believe they are classified as a knight, although they don't have a shield. They do pull out a very nasty 2-hander in melee. They are also very deadly off the charge. They're swift because they're elven cavalry. Looking at them, I don't think they have the highest armor values, of course, but they do tend to withstand quite a lot of punishment because of that multiple HP. Back here we got some Mithlon swordsmen, the 2-hander sword of Linden, the basic one anyway. A ballista, of course, which is way back here. I mean, they certainly intend for the blue team to come forward and attack them. We've got some Noldorin Guard over here, which is the only unit of Linden's which is genuinely pretty well armoured. Pretty much the equivalent to the Imladris Guardians from Imladris. And over here we also have the Noldorin Blade Masters, so he's gone pretty quality heavy, the Linden player, which in a situation like this is not a terrible idea. Multiple HP, very, very powerful. In terms of elven 2-handers, they are probably the strongest of all of them. But obviously the other elves have got their multiple HP units in different places. And over here we have more of the cavalry, which I believe just Mithlon Lancers, so they are the Javelin Cavalry, which double as Lancer Cavalry. So they can be used to hunt cavalry with their javelins and then hunt infantry with their lances. Can be useful, but if they get caught in melee before all of their javelins have been expended, that is going to be a bit of a waste. But we shall see. And over here, finally, we have Dale, played by Axios, and then we can finally get into it. This is a very weird formation over here. I'm sure this wasn't intentional, unless there's some sort of geometry which we can't see, which is in the way. He's got some Bardian marksmen, unupgraded with their armour models, but they still look pretty damn good anyway. Very resilient skirmish unit, but they may well struggle against the Lothlorien archers because of the accuracy discrepancy. But, rather fortunately for him, he has got some Morroquendi bows, which are of course formerly known as the Avari Elder Archers. And obviously as elves, they are going to be the match of other elven units. They are more expensive, however, because they are technically counted as mercenaries, which increases their cost. However, they can go blow for blow with them, which may well be Dale's saving grace here. It's denying Lothlorien as big a skirmish advantage as they could have. And then over here we also have some Dalian marksmen to fill out the line more so. Back here we have the heavier core of Dale, we have some Earls of Dale. As melee cav, they should do decently against the Lothlorien cavalry, but they are going to need to be supported, I feel. Otherwise the Elven cavalry will reap a pretty hefty cost on them. The Earls of Esgaroth, which are of course the heavy duty infantry unit that Dale are going to be relying on here because they've got 3 units of them. That's a big investment. Very quality heavy armies, all of these. We've got some Girian's Paladins. That's just the Rohan army over there. Obviously the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, which is where the General's hanging out. AP missiles, long range as well, so they could be used to hunt a multitude of units actually, but interestingly enough, the elves are not really the most heavily armoured force anyway, but I will be interested to see how they do against the elven units as they approach. Another unit we haven't seen in quite a while actually, formerly known as the Swordmasters of Dale, or Dale Swordmasters. We have the Swordmasters of Carnan, which are basically the equivalent to the Care Andros Swordmasters, only for Dale. We've also got some Barding Herd back there, and a Catapult back here. So now, let us begin. I might actually make a little cut depending on what happens here. Depending on what, yeah, these spears are falling back. So I will make a little cut, because obviously they are sort of, the red team has deployed quite a long ways back, and the blue team will have to advance towards them, because I think the onus will be on them. The red team has certainly put their cards down and saying that they're going to go at the back of the map, so yes, there will be a cut. So things are getting underway over here, and interestingly enough, the red team have adopted a defensive posture, but I'm not sure they have the level of infantry necessary to cover all their angles, which I think maybe the blue team are going to be able to take advantage of here. And mainly that comes down to Rohan, because Rohan have gone a little bit more cavalry heavy, which could help them if they decide to try and counter-attack on one of the flanks with all of their cavalry at once. But they do need to be careful here, because it looks like the Elves of Lothlorien are going to ignore Dale's position, which is actually quite wise, and the blue team might well try to pick out Rohan here. Trying to focus down on the weakest member of your opposing team can be quite appealing. And in terms of a defensive fight like this, Rohan are certainly the ones least equipped to deal with it. Over here, Linden are certainly quite well entrenched, and it is a position which I wouldn't be too eager to take on. Even if Harad have got quite a lot of numbers that they can throw into the Linden lines, it is still going to be quite risky. But you can see over here that the cavalry wing of the red team is making its move on this flank, so you can see the Riddermark cavalry leading the way, with the Aerid of Altberg and the Mithlond Lancers following them in. And this is where Harad might run into a few problems, because I'm not sure Harad have got enough cavalry to bottle them up entirely. We also have the Mithlond Lancers and the Noldorin Horse Lords over here. Now the Mercenary Crossbowmen and the Mercenary Cavalry are moving in. The Mercenary Crossbows could do a pretty decent amount of damage to these Noldorin Horse Lords, provided they don't get caught in melee. Now the Noldorin Horse Lords are a very potent cavalry unit, which does mean that the Mercenary Cavalry is going to fall away very quickly, particularly under the javelin fire of the Mithlond Lancers over here. And the Mercenary Crossbows are going to be firing, but they're going to need to retreat, with the Mercenary Cavalry already being ripped asunder. Noldorin also taking a few crossbow bolts, but the angle of fire was arced a little bit, and the Mithlond Lancers chasing them off, using his cavalry in melee before they're out of ammunition. Very good move here, situationally, by Dictar to the power of N. The Serpent Guard is also falling back. So over here, the mercenaries already routing because of that low mercenary morale. And over here, the Elves of Linden taking the front foot and forcing the blue team onto the defence on this flank. So I feel as though if they're going to rely on their cavalry to really bust through the opposing line, they're going to need to be aggressive quickly here, because it won't take Harad a long time to set up a defence over here, which is going to make it difficult for the opposing team, because Harad have brought a lot of pikemen. And those Southron pikes are going to be very difficult for Linden and Rohan to get through. And Harad has cavalry of their own they can use. And the Hashari Stalkers are here. They are a ranger unit with body piercing, which could be devastating for Linden and even Rohan's lower tier cavalry. You can see how quickly those Mithlond Lancers fell apart to those Hashari Stalkers. A ranger unit with body piercing is a very scary thing indeed to a lightly armoured force. And Linden is going to struggle here. Meanwhile, if we go to the other side of the map real quick, we can see that Dale, Rohan and Lothlorien are all squaring off against one another. The dwarves of Khazad-dûm have also moved up in the middle. Rohan is actually taking the offensive here in this middle point of the battle. The Lothlorien archers are firing away. Those Westmark marshals, the unshielded axemen, have been torn to bits by the Lothlorien archers. Very unfortunate for Rohan. Dale is going to need to get in here and help his ally very quickly. Otherwise, Rohan is not going to have a lot of infantry left to support him in the late game. Just going to have a quick look over here to see if Rohan did make a charge. It does look like they tried. But there was Southron Warband on hand here. Looks like there's a few dead Serpent Guardsmen as well. But ultimately Rohan having to pull back. Their cavalry is going to struggle to get through Harad unless they can find some very minute gaps indeed and really be bold with their men. And you can see over here the mercenary guildsmen are moving forward. They're going to engage the Westmark spears. That is the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm, and they've got decent missile damage. There's Meduseld Guard back here as well, which is going to be a pretty decent target if they can take out those higher tier javelins. Meanwhile, if we have a look here, the mercenary guildsmen immediately springing into action when the spears get close. And the Mercenary Guildsmen should do decently. It'll be quite a long, drawn-out fight over here, but at this point, Rohan, their infantry is struggling. And I think the red team, they have backed themselves into a corner somewhat by allowing the attackers to move forward and set up. Actually, if we're just going to turn the speed down to half speed. Over here, Rohan is making a bit of a play of it. The Hornburg sentries are moving forward. Their AP won't help them a huge amount against Lothlorien. But these Lothlorien spears won't be able to hold back all of these men all on their own. Eventually, I think the damage will start to tell on them. But Rohan are still taking some heavy casualties, and Dale are now getting shot as well by the Lothlorien skirmish line. The Dalian marksmen taking some pretty heavy losses. What's going on over here? We can see that the Sons of Yorl are also moving around to help out the Dalian cavalry over here, and the Galathran riders, they're going to have to vacate the premises. They've got some pretty high missile damage, but the Sons of Yorl are better placed than most other cavalry units on the field to resist that sort of thing. Despite the fact they do sacrifice some of the defensive properties of knights to be more aggressive, they are still a very tough unit to break down indeed. Well, if we have a look over here, you can see that this front line is a pretty strong meat grinder. We can see that the Lothlorien axes are at the front, being backed up by the Lothlorien blades. I will say that Lothlorien definitely have the advantage over here. The Riddermark spears are out of their depth when facing elven units of this quality. And I think Rohan needs to be more readily supported by his allies here, because Dale's infantry is lagging a long way behind, and he needs the support of the Dalian numbers and armour to really have a greater effect on this front line. And over here he's also having to divide his infantry between Lothlorien and Khazad-dûm, two factions who have got a pretty heavy infantry advantage over Rohan, especially in this situation. You can see actually that the Realm of Lothlorien Sindar Blade Masters have managed to get in behind the Rohan lines. Now the Harlinden infantry of Linden has moved forward, however they've moved forward without the support of their pikemen, which is going to allow the Serpent Guard to get a nice frontal charge off on them. That didn't seem to kill any of them though. Very weak source charge there from the Serpent Guard. They were a little bit too close to get up to charge speed, I guess. So Harad need to be careful they don't spread themselves too thin, because the cavalry is certainly focusing their energy on taking on Harad. While over here you can see that the Noldorin Horse Lords have charged forth, engaging the Southron Warband. They'll do a decent amount of damage off the charge. They do need to get out of there quickly, however. These are spears. This is not a particularly cost-effective engagement, because even though they are going to win, and the javelins are pouring into them and the Southron Warband are falling apart, you don't want to be using your javelins on a unit of basic Haradrim spearmen. This is something that your infantry can pretty easily tie up. The pikemen are taking losses, a better target I suppose, considering that they will be able to hold lines very, very well. The Harlinden infantry is now moving forward to assist Rohan on this side. However, they are going to have to go toe-to-toe with the dwarves. We'll see how well they can do. We can see the Lothlorien Mounted Company moving forward. The 4th Legion Shield Guard should be able to hold the Harlinden infantry at bay for the time being, particularly if this Lothlorien cavalry can get in behind and start hammer and ambulling them. Although this is a very thin line of spears, the Orc Hunters need to be careful they don't get caught out in melee. Over here you can see the Sindar Blade Masters going deep. There are 2 units of them, and they are going to be enough to deal with the Harlinden infantry, I think. They are a very attack-focused unit. They're in behind the lines, causing havoc. The Rohirrim over here, however, are doing pretty well against the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm. The Mercenary Guildsmen not having a particularly good time of it against some of these Axemen. And the higher tier spears are holding themselves much better than the Riddermark are on the other side. If we have a look over here though, Rohan are actually doing a decent job on this front. The Hornburg sentries slowly but surely doing some damage, although with the addition of the Sindar archers in melee and the Lothlorien archers that are presumably out of melee, out of ammo, the multiple HP of the Sindar archers should be enough to stabilise this line for Lothlorien, and that will be good for them. Although Rohan's doing a pretty good job considering his attention has had to be split a little bit. Over here, however, the Rohirrim infantry is horribly outclassed. The Lothlorien axes having a field day against the Riddermark spearmen. Finally, the Dalian infantry looks like it's arriving on the scene. I wonder if Rohan hasn't taken too many losses already, although the Earls of Dale are in behind the line. I'm not sure how they managed to wiggle their way through. They're a pretty slow cavalry unit. They're not a Lancer cavalry, however, so they won't do a huge amount of damage off the charge, but still their presence behind the line is not particularly appreciated by the Elves of Lothlorien, I'm sure. There's the Khazad-dûm artillery, doing a pretty heavy amount of damage there. Well, the Lothlorien Mounted Company is actually taking damage from the archers. The Wardens of Elos Tyrian are on the field. Single unit of them, very similar to the Hashari Stalkers we saw earlier. They have the body piercing, which is going to be particularly potent against some of these lightly armoured cavalrymen. I mean, the Serpent Guard have shields, but it's not going to save them here from the Wardens of Elos Tyrian. That's a lot of damage they've taken very quickly. They are going to be able to get into melee with the Wardens though, but the archers behind them, I can't imagine these Serpent Guard are going to stay here for very long. I think they're probably going to break if they stay here. You don't want your cavalry to break for sure. Sindar Blade Master still doing very well despite being completely surrounded. I'm not sure where they're getting victory seems certain from, because the Harlinden infantry is managing to wrap around them. I suppose it's because they're beating the Riddermark spears, which is interesting. While over here, what's going on? The Earls of Dale are continuing to try and put pressure on this front line over here, but the Lothlorien Mounted Company charging after them. The Earls of Dale did a good job there though, and now the infantry of Dale is moving forward. These Lothlorien axes, that's not a particularly fantastic sight for them to see the entire Dalian infantry army cresting the hill. They got a little bit too gung-ho there, I think, but just in time actually, because this Rohan infantry line was about to crumble. Meanwhile, let's have a look back here. The Riddermark cavalry. Looks like there has been a few charges. Looks like some of the 2nd Legion Axe Guard have been dealt with. The Mithril Guard, if they get a hold of any of the cavalry in melee, is going to put them to bed pretty quickly because of the AP damage, even on that lower tier Riddermark cavalry. The Serpent Guard is broken, as I thought. The Aerid of Alberg is shaken, but they are now in behind the lines. And over here, in the middle, where Linden and Rohan are really making a real fist of it over here, the Rohirrim cavalry is continually shutting down the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm, allowing the archers of Linden to just move forward and have it all their own way. Meanwhile, if we have a look over here, you can see that there is cavalry roaming around, and it is indeed more of the Haradrim cavalry. The Serpent Guard are fighting to the death, but they find themselves in melee with the Mithlon Lancers. Some of the Mithlon Lancers still have their javelins, they are now depleted, but some javelins is better than none, and it is a ballista fight, I believe. Actually, the ballista's going after the Trollman. I think that Harad really need to throw caution to the wind and move forward here, because their ally is struggling here in the middle. The dwarves are unable to contain both Rohan and the dwarves, and you can see the Lothlorien Mounted Company is having to charge into the front of spears. That's not good for them. The Westmark spearmen will take that fight. They will take losses against cavalry like that, but it's going to be cost effective for Rohan, and that is the important thing. Dale, meanwhile, is over here, looming large, but now Dale need to get in here and help. I'm not sure why they're just sort of stood here watching these men die. I mean, getting these side shots into the backs of these Lothlorien spears is not a bad thing, but those Hornburg sentries are getting massacred. Orc Hunters getting targeted by the catapult, maybe not the best use of its time. These Dalian marksmen, though, and the Morroquindi bows, laying waste to these guys over here. They need to hope the Rohan infantry holds them at bay for a little longer, though, otherwise they may be caught off guard a little bit. Dale has managed to wrap around over here as well with all of their units of Earls. A charge there from the Lothlorien Mounted Company. The Earls of Esgaroth managing to hold firm. The Galathrim nobles just in behind there. They probably won't win this either, the Earls, because they are definitely a unit based around their armour. Not so much their high skill like these higher tier Elven units are. But it is going to take the Elves quite a while to chew their way through this, because none of those Elven units are AP and the Earls' armour value is pretty high. Meanwhile, if we have a look over here where the red team seem to be having the most joy, I'd say the red team probably have the advantage at the moment. Although having said that, the blue team is certainly ahead in terms of the percentages of kills. But in terms of the positional play, I think if the red team sort of are bold and try and wipe out the centre here as quickly as they possibly can, they might have a bit of joy here, to be fair. Going quite so cavalry heavy on this map was a bit of a risky gambit by Rohan. There goes the Khazad-dûm catapult, which could well have a big say in this battle. We can see that the Khazad-dûm reclaimers, who might be out of ammo because they are now getting engaged in melee with their two-handed axes. They may have been used against the cavalry earlier on. But with them and the hammers of Gundabad, the advance of the Harlington infantry will be halted unless they send up some support. And particularly seeing as they're about to be overlapped and surrounded by the Harad army, who is now moving forward. So it looks like Linden has chased his quarry too far. What's going on over here? Because Rohan was pushing through over here. Again, Linden is moving forward, but they need to be careful because they are in danger of being surrounded. The dwarves, I think, have managed to get this area under control. The Mithlon Swordmasters are about to be charged by the Lothlorien Mounted Company. Not a hugely devastating charge, that, and several of the cavalrymen will fall. Oof. I mean, they need to be careful here for the catapult-friendly fire, but they got some good hits on those Lothlorien archers and Sindar archers, so the risk paid off there. The Mithlon Swordmasters will do decently in melee against all of those units as well, as the mercenaries and war chiefs move forward. Or nasty rear charge coming up from the Riddermark cavalry. Again, maybe not as powerful as it could have been, but it is still going to be enough to tilt this battle in Rohan's favour. So they're making the most of what they've got here, Rohan. This is very good of them. And they might be able to crack another line over here. But Harad's advance is going to be a worry here. The units that Lyndon left in reserve are going to have to be enough to deal with the Haradrim push. And I'm not sure it is, because the presence of the Trollmen and the Hashari in particular are going to be a worrying factor for Lyndon. And I think the Black Serpents are still alive. Indeed they are. And it doesn't look like Lyndon have got much in the way of cavalry there. Noldorin have been largely spent. And now their Wardens of Elos Tyrian are being engaged in melee. By lower tier spears, admittedly, but I mean, I don't think Lyndon have got enough infantry left to deal with this kind of push. I mean, the Noldorin Guard and the Noldorin Blade Masters are hugely powerful infantry units, but they are going to be... If Harad wrap around, it's going to be over for Lyndon, and that could lead to the red team's flank collapsing. This Black Serpent bodyguard that was held back for a while has taken some losses, but now they're getting into the Lyndon archers. They need some way of stopping these Black Serpents. I mean, these Noldorin Horse Lords might be able to do it, honestly, with just 8 of them. They are a very, very potent cavalry unit, but I mean, you can see here that the evidence of some charges that have happened, and I don't know, I think Lyndon may have pursued his enemy too far, and this might be the end for him. Noldorin Blade Masters, though, really doing a lot of damage there. The mercenary crossbows have come back. They are now a factor again in the battle from the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm. They can be used to zone out the Noldorin Horse Lords if they pursue the Black Serpents, but at this point Harad can probably just use his infantry to wrap around. So staying back turned out to be a pretty decent move for him. But over here, Rohan, it looks like they're going to be... It looks like they are going to be defeated, but it's going to be sort of a Pyrrhic victory for the Dwarves over here. So the red team are really going to have to be placing their hopes on Dale, I think, at this point. Because I think Rohan's infantry on this side that was supporting Dale is largely spent. The Mithlon Swordmasters will be able to meet up with the Dalian advance as well as these Sons of Yorl. In fact, it looks like the axis of the battle is going to change from between vertical and horizontal, because it looks like either flank is going to fall for either side. The Galathram nobles are fighting hard, but ultimately they are going to be overwhelmed by the Dalian infantry. Dale left a lot of stuff in reserve. I wonder if he still has his ammunition on his Blackshot Dragon Slayers. That could well be key in the late game. And the Bardian Marksmen are still firing as well. And he also still has his Swordmasters of Karnan.
Our men have fought long and are becoming tired.
The Southron archers are now firing in. Lyndon don't do well under archer fire, and Lyndon's initial starting position looks like it's going to be overrun. It's how much they can kill. And honestly, these elite Lyndon infantry units are really making a good fist of it. Harad need to surround these Noldorin Blade Masters, otherwise there's a good chance for saying that they might actually be victorious here. The Noldorin Blade Masters are a very, very scary unit. They're definitely the sort of unit that catches your eye when you see them on the field. And they are ripping their way through these lightly armoured Southrons. The 4 Lyndon archers and Wardens of Elos Tyrian that are out of ammunition managed to defeat the spears back there, I think. Oh, there goes Haldir. The Lyndon units that have moved over to help his allies will be a factor in the late game. The Mithlon Swordmasters, of course, slaying Haldir there. The first general to fall. The Khazad-dûm catapult firing in, and that may well be a problem. If Dale stays too bunched up, the Khazad-dûm catapult could get a lot of value off. The Mithril Guard are still in reserve, and there are still some Dwarven pikes as well. Rohan is not giving up this fight, though. The Sons of Yorl are going to be able to give victory to this admittedly quite insignificant fight in the grand scheme of things, but even so, it's more dwarves that are dead, less 3rd Legion for the late game. The Riddermark Cavalry, on the other hand, is also moving forth. They are going to be helping Lyndon deal with this Haradrim blob, and I feel as though the Haradrim here have failed to take advantage of this opportunity as much as they could have. Now the Hashari Stalkers are on their way forward, which is still a very potent tool in the late game. So for those of you who say that people only submit replays in which they win, the Lothlorien player who sent me the replay is the first one to exit the field. Having said that, he did have to deal with both Dale and Rohan infantry, as well as the Dalian cavalry behind his lines. We shall see how this goes, though. I mean, these Sons of Yorl need to be careful, because there are pikemen in here, but he has caused them to rout, so Lyndon, amazingly, despite all odds, are going to be able to win over here, at least for the time being. I mean, Harad, it's only a matter of time, I feel like, before Harad will be victorious over here. Those Hashari Stalkers move way too close if they've still got ammunition. And there are those mercenary crossbows which are trying to help out the Haradrim. Definitely the Sons of Yorl are going to be a good target for them. And the Muhad Beast Hunters are also there. I mean, these Sons of Yorl are in a bit of a dangerous position. the amount of range fire that's going to be pouring into them is going to be concerning for the Rohan player. Because those aren't super high tier javelins, but it's still AP projectiles which are going to be tearing into his men and depleting their hit points. Although those mercenary crossbows are going to be terrible in melee, and indeed they've already routed, but there goes a huge amount of the Sons of Yore. Very important target they can take out. Noldorin Blade Masters, under fire from a few Southron archers, but they've managed to carve their way through the enemy there. The Noldorin Blade Masters and Guard, two opposite ends of the spectrum really in terms of unit type. The lightly armoured multiple HP shock troop and the heavily armoured single HP mainline infantry unit, combining their powers to defeat the horde of Haradrim. As we have a look over here, the Khazad-dûm catapult doing its best to get some value. I mean, it wouldn't take... bloody hell, that camera shake. It wouldn't take much, honestly. I mean, a good hit on some of these Dale units. Dale are really the ace in the hole for the red team here, I feel, because eventually Lyndon and Rohan are going to be overwhelmed. And I feel like Dale is doing his allies a bit of a disservice here by not moving forward and pressuring the flanks. Because I feel as though, you know, there's a lot of open avenues of attack here. The dwarves can't cover both of them. And I feel as though this dwarven army is here for the taking from Dale. I mean, they're trying to use their archers, I get that. But I feel like a blitzkrieg approach here would be the most necessary thing. I mean, these Khazad-dûm reclaimers are certainly a concern, I'm sure, but Dale have the... I mean, you're just giving the dwarves a chance to use their catapult here. Dale is trying to use their catapult as well. Are they going to hit? A grazing hit. I don't know, I think the dwarves are quite glad for this respite. We'll see how this pans out in the later game, because over here, provided Lyndon does enough damage, it might not even matter. But finally it does look like Lyndon are going to give up the ghost. Or are they? Well, the Noldorin Guard certainly are, because they're now engaged by more heavily armoured dwarven infantry units. The Shield Guard should be enough. There are still some Wardens of Elos Tyrion in melee. But these Noldorin Blade Masters, still victory seems certain. There are even some Trollmen backing up the Southron Pikes as well. Even when under attack from pikemen, these men are just not giving up. And every kill will help, because if Dale intends to be a little bit more defensive in his positioning, if they can whittle down the amount of troops that Harad have to support the dwarves with, that may well be key in the late game. There's still some Rohan cavalry over here as well, and the Sons of Yore, if they get a nice charge off, it could be devastating. The Demons of the Desert are over here as well. That's another unit which could well be very, very key in the late game, because the amount of damage they can lay down very quickly. This is one of the reasons why I would be a little bit concerned that Dale is so static. Except that these 4 Lyndon archers, I assume they're going to try and help out their Noldorin Guard, which might be turning the tide over here. They're certainly trying their best to fight off these Shield Guard. 4 Lyndon archers are going to get a rear charge on them. I have to say, considering I was worried that the Lyndon player here, Dictards of the Power of N, would be a little bit standoffish and just sort of sit at the back of the map and be content with that, but as the battle has gone on, he's probably been the player that's impressed me the most so far. He did chase the enemy a little bit too far with his Harlington infantry, I think, but other than that, he's taken the front foot and he's taken the fight to Harad, and I like that. And well, these Trollmen, now that the Trollmen are here, this fight is going to eventually fall away. They're multiple HP. They'll be able to deal with the Noldorin Guard, and then they should be able to help deal with the Noldorin Blade Masters, but these poor pikemen are just getting sliced apart. What's going on over here? Have Dale decided to move in yet? No, the Mithlon Swordmasters are going to seek shelter behind the Dalian Line Tower, which is understandable. Still some Noldorin Horse Lords as well. The Lyndon General is still alive, despite the fact his army is largely in tatters. We are now well within the final 10,000 frames. This has been a good map so far. Good showcase of the dead marshes as well, and how it's different to a regular field battle. It's more difficult to flank and take your opponent by surprise, because it takes a lot longer to flank around because of the bodies of water. But people can still lose track of your units, and I feel as though with Rohan and Dale getting in behind the blue team's lines, that was pretty key. That may well come into it in the late game. The first Marshal's bodyguard is still in pretty good health as well, and that's a multiple HP Lancer, so the charges they can lay down are going to be mightily impressive. The Black Serpents are not going to be able to stop the Rohan cavalry all on their own. They're going to need help from either the dwarves or their own javelins, but it looks like Harad... I mean, Harad have tried to take out the Elves of Lyndon without using as many resources as they can, and I get that, but I feel as though they should have just tried to crush Lyndon beneath their heel with everything they had. Because I feel as though being conservative with your ammunition might hurt you in the late game here. if the Rohan cavalry is used wisely and Dale keep their lines in shape, it will be very difficult, I think, for the blue team to come back from this. I'm not sure if the Dwarven catapult's got any more ammunition left. I mean, it's had some impact on the Dalian lines, but not a huge amount. The sentries of Khazad-dûm, the dwarves still have pikes, which will help their lines stay in shape. But I wonder if Harad has got the stuff to deal with Dale in melee. They've got the AP. The Demons of the Desert could well be what turns the battle. They do an awful amount of damage and they're good in melee as well. The Linden troops, the battered Linden troops still alive. I'm not sure if Dale still have ammunition on those Dragon Slayers, it's going to be really difficult for the blue team. The blue team are somewhat surrounded on all sides. You can see red arrows sort of pressuring them from multiple directions. The Mithril Guard taking a charge there. But thanks to their multiple HP and their AP, they're going to be able to do a decent amount of damage to the Sons of Yorl as they try and get out. Probably not the target I would have gone for, to be honest. I would have gone for more vulnerable units. And also, the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers and the Muhad Beast Hunters are over here now as well. So hand projectiles galore. Ooh, what was that? Oh, they ran through the stakes. Disaster. First Marshal's Bodyguard losing several unit models there on the stakes that the dwarves placed at the start of the battle. There's still some Riddermark cavalry, interestingly enough. Bit of a lull in proceedings here as people sort of stand off and wait for someone to make the next move. Not sure who it's going to be. There's one Meduseld guard over here. He's all on his own and no one has noticed him. And I think he's trying to assassinate the Haradrim general, which is hilarious. Am I going to be able to get a screenshot of this hero? Or is he going for the Demons of the Desert? Nope. Well, there's the Haradrim general. I think they have finally noticed him. Or have they? Yes, they did notice him. And there he goes. Fearless in the face of danger, as the Rohirrim cavalry is starting to make another move. I'm surprised Dale is being so conservative here, because Rohan is trying to harass the enemy, but the blue team can focus all of their attention on the Rohirrim cavalry because Dale is not moving. I mean, that catapult crew is off to meet the gods at this now. They're obviously not going to be able to stand up to the Rohirrim cavalry. I think one of the cavalrymen actually fell there. Oh my word. Well, there goes the Rohirrim cavalry, the Demons of the Desert, tearing through. Amazingly, the general's still alive. Oof. That was brutal. All of the Sons of Yorl that were left, completely destroyed. The catapult crew, I mean, if that was an intentional gambit to lure the cavalry in, that was very well played by Horsey Hawks. But even so, that was a devastating loss for Rohan there. They still have their general. And at this point, Dale's lack of action may well come to bite them, because I think Harad have got the ranged advantage. The Dwarven pikemen will probably be able to hold. Looking at the Dalian army, they have some two-handed swords, which will do well. Oh yeah, here we are, look. The ranged advantage is in favour of the blue team. Finally, Dale is moving forward, but this is something I feel as though they should have done a long time ago. I'm a big proponent of being more aggressive and sitting back, and like again, you've got a lot of units in reserve here, but sending forward sort of token forces against the dwarves is never a good thing. That is Rohan, I believe. Rohan has quit the field, which is surprising. Those two First Marshal's Bodyguard could have been actually quite useful for tying up a skirmish unit momentarily. But we shall see. And now here comes the potential heroes of the hour, the Demons of the Desert. Risky in a normal field battle because of how they can be focused down. Look at that though. Just tearing through the Dalian line. A lot of those will get back up, I hasten to add. You can see that several of them are getting back up. But that will disrupt the formation, and they're essentially stuck there. And this attack from Dale has essentially been thrown off. I feel as though the red team at one point had the advantage in this match. If they seized the initiative, they could have really managed to get in behind the dwarves and do a lot of damage. But at this point, I mean, the Dalian marksmen are not going to be enough. Dale need to move forward with everything they have, or they will be destroyed. I mean, over here, this attack is probably going to go slightly better. But it is only made up of archers that are out of ammunition, so the pikemen will probably be sufficient to lock them in place for long enough Again, yeah, the Khazad-dûm reclaimers are on their way over here as well. And now the Demons of the Desert, they don't have a lot of ammo, so I think they've used up all of their ammunition. They're being charged into melee. They're very potent in melee as well. I think they classify as two-handed spear units, which there aren't many of them in the game. I think it's them, the Fountain Guard, and something else. At least that's what I was told, of course, by J-Monster. But that means it's primarily only really applicable against cavalry that their huge bonuses come into play. But here, they're going to be more than enough to help deal with this Dalian infantry as it advances, and I can't help but feel as though the writing's on the wall here. Particularly with these Hashari Stalkers, the body piercing is going to be brutal on these more lightly armoured shock troops. The Sword Masters of Karnan, which I was actually quite looking forward to seeing in action, are being ripped asunder by the Haradrim Rangers. Oof, that's nasty. And again, this might look overpowered, but the Rangers, units like that, they don't do very well against heavily armoured targets. They barely do any damage at all, so the Earls would be able to stand up to the Hashari Stalkers much, much better, which is why he wasn't shooting the Earls. Instead, fair play to Arcturus, he knows what targets to go after, and he has selected the weak point in his opponent's army, and he is now really destroying them. So the Swordmasters of Karnan are never going to even get to melee. They've just been torn asunder. The Mithlon Swordmasters are back there. There's Bardian Marksman. I mean, at this point, the Dale player can do little else other than just sort of charge and hope for a warrior's death. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers were indeed out of ammunition and had to be committed to melee. There's the Catapult crew as well. The Trollmen, which survived the encounter with Lyndon, have moved forward and are helping to shore up this line. I think the... Oh, there goes the Lyndon General there.
Without him, his troops will lose their will to fight.
Fair play to him. He's tried his best, but the Bearded Elf shot down and destroyed. It's only the Dalian General left on the red team. Bardian Marksman moving forwards. The archers destroying what's left of the Lyndon cavalry, but again, the blue team I think are more than happy to just sort of hold this infantry in place with the trollmen and with the pikes. And if they can win this other infantry engagement over here, which they are going to with some significant margin over here. In fact, the Hashari Stalkers and Muhad Beast Hunters, where did the Demons of the Desert go? Surely they aren't dead already. Well, there are 42 of them, so they're mixed in over here. Some of the Swordmasters got into melee. The Girians Paladins, that might explain where some of the demons have gone. But even the Girians Paladins, which are a very powerful unit, most of the Haradrim are lightly armoured. And the Mithril Guard they would do quite well against in a vacuum, but with the support of the Haradrim, the extra armor-piercing damage here will really help bring these Paladins down. The Hashari Stalkers moving forth. And now the Javelins again. Good use of Javelins here. Early on it was good use of Javelins by Lyndon to deal heavy damage to the Haradrim cavalry and force the blue team onto the defensive on the left-hand side of the mini-map. But as the battle has gone on, I think the coordination between the blue team was slightly better. I mean, Lothlorien definitely bore the brunt of the red team's fury. But Harad and Khazad-dûm managed to twin together quite well in the end, despite the fact they took quite a lot of heavy losses to Lyndon. They were able to do quite well on that flank in the end. And Rohan, again, I do think that going quite so cavalry heavy was probably... It kind of worked, but I can't help but feel as though some archers, some more ranged presence would probably not have gone amiss for Rohan. I mean, if you wanted to bring more cavalry as well, you could have made it horse archers, because that would have definitely helped as well, help deal with the blue team's cavalry. It would have been interesting to see how that would have gone. The Rohirrim horse archers are very good. The Riders of the Fold could have been most effective in this sort of situation, particularly against Harad, which is where the cavalry was initially. What is going on over here? Looks like Lyndon has charged into battle alongside his ally. The Mithlon Swordmasters are here, but the Hashari Stalkers break them immediately. Very good in melee as well, the Hashari Stalkers. I don't think they're quite as good as the standard Hashari, but they're not far off. I remember in the last patch they were literally exactly the same unit in melee, but that might have changed, I think. But the body piercing on these guys is so good. Definitely, if you want going skirmish heavy as Harad, you definitely pin quite a lot of your hopes on the Hashari Stalkers, because the rest of your archers are just sort of volume, whereas these guys are the genuine venom. But over here, the Mithlon Swordmasters are wavering. The Girians Paladins won't break. They are probably locked morale based on the kind of unit that they are. And the Mithril Guard are over here.
The enemy army flees the field. Pursue and
That is Lyndon broken. Dale will fight to the end. And I feel as though Dale's passivity and waiting probably is what ultimately lost the red team the match here, because despite the fact they were often losing in terms of the percentage of kills, there were gaps in the line which Rohan was trying to exploit, and Lyndon was sort of really trying to push through his opponent, but Dale always seemed to be lagging behind his allies a little bit. And if your team is separate and the other team is more together, that often ends up deciding a battle like this. As we sort of come towards the end of this fight, we might as well kick it into times 2 speed actually. It's really just a case of how long the Blackshot Dragon Slayers and the Girions Paladins want to prolong this. The Haradrim General is still alive despite being poked and prodded by that Meduseld Guardsman. The Ballista is still alive as well. It looks like the Girions Paladins are actually going to fall away before the Dale Dragon Slayers. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers with their Wind Lances, alongside the Bardian Marksmen, are going to make their final stand here on the Death Marshes. And this map was pretty much a perfect example of why I like this map, because it is a field battle, but it's a non-conventional field battle. You have to come into it with a different mindset if you're going to be successful, and particularly if you're on a team battle, which this map is more designed for, of course. Coordination between your team is all important, I think, because if you coordinate well, then your opponents are going to have a much tougher time of it. And we have a look at the percentage of kills. Within 10%, that's the marker I always use for saying whether or not a map was close, and this is going to be just within that. 100% to 90%, so fair play to the players, and no one is allowed to complain because the guy who sent it to me died first, so it wasn't just some dude wanting to show off. I've got no control over that for anyone who complains about that. You know, I'm not a part of the game, so I can't choose whether or not the blue or the red team wins. That's not what I can do. And with the scenarios, most people want to show it off because of the maps, not because they won. But regardless, big thank you to
We are victorious. Our soldiers
Indeed.
have fought and died well today.
Big thank you for the second pink for submitting this replay to me. Harad doing quite well. I did think he was maybe a little bit passive, but that did actually end up working in his favour. But I do think that Dictar to the Power of N was probably the star performer on the field, because he really did a lot considering he was dealt a bit of a rough hand. The support he got from Rohan was much appreciated, I'm sure. Dale, I feel as though if they had been a little bit more aggressive as soon as Lothlorien fell apart, if Dale followed through and really started attacking the dwarves alongside what was left of the Rohirrim infantry, this battle could have gone the other way, I feel like. But it got away from them in the end. Having a look at the Lothlorien army, who is the only stats we can see, of course. Galathram Nobles, that's the mounted horse archer, getting a huge amount of kills, 218, shows how effective they are. 290 kills on some Lothlorien axes. Again, that was probably against the lower tier Rohan spears and infantry. We didn't see the Rohan sword and boards in action. You know, they were sort of mixed in with the spears, and it's a shame we can't actually see the Rohirrim players' statistics. Sindar Blade Masters, mixed results from them. I think the one that got surrounded didn't get too many kills, understandably. Lothlorien axes doing well though against the majority of the Rohirrim stuff. Maybe some of their higher tier units didn't do as well as they were expecting though, and I feel as though Dale initially did quite well to help Rohan deal with Lothlorien, but eventually they kind of lost their bottle a little bit, and unfortunately I feel as though that cost the red team the game. Fair play to the blue team though. I think they worked together reasonably well. Lothlorien got kind of left out in the cold a little bit, but Khazad-dûm and Harad combined their forces to pretty good effect. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which, I don't know, considering how close I am to 2,000 subs, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be doing with regards to that, but I'm sure that I'll cobble something together and I'll relay what that will be when it's closer to the time. But yes, I hope you enjoyed.